Hashtag the day humanity showed up at the Galactic Council with bloodstained ships. The Galactic Council chamber was a monument to excess. Floating crystal chandeliers, each worth more than the annual output of some mid-tier star systems, hung from ceilings so high that smaller council species required visual enhancement just to see them. Marble-like substances imported from 17 different worlds and chosen specifically for their complementary shimmering properties, lined walls that curved in mathematically perfect arcs, a design that had required 3 separate subcommittees and 98 years to approve. Ambassador Kthar of the Xylar sat in his designated position, his 4 upper appendages arranged in the traditional posture of receptive dignity, as outlined in Section 47 of the Proper Conduct Guidelines. His scales gleamed under the chamber's carefully calibrated lighting, which had been designed to flatter all 234 recognized sentient species equally, a feat that had taken a lighting commission 12 decades to perfect. And so, his resonant voice filled the chamber. I must once again emphasize that the use of the third-person plural reflexive pronoun themselves when referring to the Zat-Ral hive consciousness clearly violates subsection 12c.4 of the Linguistic Respect Protocols. They are, by definition, a singular collective consciousness and must be addressed as itself. Administrator Flim fidgeted in his seat. The tiny knock, barely a meter tall, frantically flipped through a stack of holographic documents, his eyes blinking in their characteristic 3-part sequence that indicated both stress and bureaucratic fervor. With all due respect, Ambassador, Flim chirped, his translator modulating his naturally high-pitched voice to something the other council members could endure without wincing. I must direct your attention to Addendum 87B of the same protocol, which clearly states that in cases of emergent consciousness patterns, the preference of the entity itself, or themselves, must be given primary consideration. Commander Forlag of the Praxians quietly sighed, a sound his respiratory sacs weren't designed to make, but one he had learned from observing other species. His attention kept drifting to the data pad, discreetly positioned on his lap, hidden from the view of the General Assembly. The screen displayed scrolling reports of unexplained energy anomalies in the outer fringe sectors, where 3 council probe ships had gone missing in the past standard month alone. He scrolled to the latest report. A Zulthet mining outpost had fallen silent after sending a garbled transmission about darkness that moves. The council's automated response had been to schedule an investigative consideration meeting for next quarter. The debate over pronouns continued to escalate, with Kthar's scales now flushing a deep purple of indignation. 2 representatives from Sectors 8 and 12 had joined in, citing obscure precedents from council meetings held millennia ago. Forlag had tried. 3 days earlier, he had presented his concerns to the Security Subcommittee, a group composed primarily of administrative officials rather than military personnel. He had compiled the data himself, mapped the patterns, and calculated the statistical improbability of coincidental failures across such a wide range of systems. I appreciate your thoroughness, Commander, Administrator Flim had said, not looking up from his terminal, where he was likely already drafting the rejection notice. But your request for increased patrol activity in the outer fringe lacks the necessary evidence threshold as specified in Form GC Alpha 7, subsection C, Extraordinary Security Measures. These are not coincidences, Forlag had insisted. Something is happening out there. Furthermore, Flim had continued as if Forlag hadn't spoken. The Council's budget priorities for the current cycle are already allocated, with primary funding directed toward the upcoming Millennial Harmony celebration. Perhaps you could resubmit in the next fiscal period with the appropriate documentation. Now, as the pronoun debate showed no signs of abating, Forlag stared at the ornate ceiling and wondered how an organization so adept at creating beauty could be so blind to danger. The council chamber, with its perfect acoustics and atmosphere tailored to comfort every known species, felt increasingly like a gilded cage, beautiful, precious, and utterly defenseless against whatever was lurking beyond the comfortable boundaries of known space. Through the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the chamber, the jewel-like central world of the Galactic Council gleamed, surrounded by the defensive grid that hadn't been tested in over 700 years because the proper testing procedures had become so complex that no one had been willing to navigate the requisite paperwork. Peace had reigned for so long that it had calcified into complacency. The Galactic Council, governing body for over 10,000 worlds, believed itself eternal and inviolable, protected by nothing more substantial than tradition and protocol. Forlag knew better, but no one was listening. The alarm shattered the chamber's perfect acoustics with a sound so jarring that several delegates physically recoiled. A harsh red light pulsed from panels that hadn't been activated in living memory, washing the pristine white and gold of the council chamber in an ominous crimson glow. Ambassador Kthar froze mid-sentence, his scales flattening against his body in an instinctive response his ancestors had evolved to appear smaller to predators. The moment passed quickly, and his aristocratic composure returned, though his scales remained a pale shade of their normal brilliance. "Who?" Kthar demanded, his voice straining to maintain dignified outrage rather than show fear. "Has authorized an emergency drill during a formal council session. This is an unacceptable violation of Section 29.b of the Meeting Sanctity Protocols." Around the chamber, similar reactions rippled through the assembly. Annoyance, irritation, procedural indignation, but remarkably little fear, a response that would have been appropriate given that none of them could remember the last time the emergency system had been activated in earnest. Administrator Flim was already furiously searching through his database. "There is no scheduled drill," he squeaked, voice rising above its translator's capacity to modulate. According to the emergency response guidelines, unscheduled drills require Form ED 27 to be filed with all council members at least 15 standard cycles in advance, with exceptions only permitted under subsection. Silence. The command came from an unexpected source, Commander Forlag, who had risen to his full, impressive height, his ridge of sensory spines fully extended in the Praxian signal of highest alert. This is not a drill. He had already activated his direct link to the Council's Defense Center, where officials who had spent their careers monitoring empty space were now faced with readings they had never been trained to interpret. The central view screen of the chamber, normally displaying serene imagery of member worlds or statistical data relevant to ongoing debates, flickered and switched to a tactical display. Forlag had overridden the normal protocols, an act that would have earned him a severe reprimand under ordinary circumstances. "Multiple unidentified objects," reported a voice from the Defense Center, wavering with uncertainty, approaching council space at velocities exceeding our standard measurement capacities. They've bypassed the outer sensor rings without triggering proximity alerts. They're not responding to standard identification requests. A murmur of genuine concern, perhaps the first in centuries, rippled through the council chamber. "Show me," Forlag commanded. The view screen shifted again, now displaying long-range visual feed. What appeared caused even Forlag, with all his military preparation, to inhale sharply. They were ships, if such brutal constructions deserve the same designation as the elegant vessels of the Council. Angular, asymmetrical, with none of the flowing aesthetic principles the Council valued, they resembled nothing so much as weapons given barely sufficient form to move through space. Their hulls were patchworks of different materials, suggesting hasty repairs and modifications. Deep scorches marked their surfaces, some sections still glowing faintly with heat or energy residue. Weapon emplacements were prominently visible, not concealed within elegant housing as on council vessels, but thrust outward like the bared teeth of a cornered predator. Most disturbing of all were the stains, dark patches that couldn't be explained by battle damage alone, spreading across the hulls like blood spatter frozen in the vacuum of space. "Initiate first contact protocols," Kthar ordered, his voice steadier now as he fell back on familiar procedure. "Transmit the standard greeting package on all frequencies." The communications officer did as instructed, sending the carefully crafted message that had been refined over thousands of years to be universally welcoming while simultaneously conveying the Council's prestige and authority. It incorporated mathematical sequences to demonstrate intelligence, symbolic imagery to indicate peaceful intentions, and subtle cues that established the council's position as the dominant political entity. There was no response. "Perhaps they don't understand our transmission formats," suggested one of the junior members. "We could try." The suggestion was cut short, as every communication device in the chamber, from the main console to the personal devices carried by each representative, simultaneously emitted a harsh burst of static. The Council's most sophisticated encryption and security measures were bypassed, as if they didn't exist. A voice filled the chamber. It was flat, unmodulated, carrying none of the careful diplomatic intonations the Council members were accustomed to. It spoke in standard Galactic, but with an accent none of them had heard before, placing emphasis on unexpected syllables and clipping others short. "This is General Anya Sharma of the United Earth Alliance. We request immediate audience with the full Galactic Council regarding an existential threat to all sentient life. Coordinates for docking bay access are required. We will consider delays as hostile action." The view screen changed again, now showing a face that matched the voice. The being looking out at them had dark skin with a network of faint scars across one side, close-cropped black hair streaked with gray, and eyes that seemed to evaluate and dismiss the council chamber's opulence in a single glance. She wore what was clearly a military uniform, utilitarian and marked with symbols of rank that meant nothing to the council members. Behind her, partially visible, was what appeared to be a command bridge, cramped, functional, with none of the comfortable spacing the council considered essential for proper working conditions. Other beings moved urgently in the background, attending to tasks with grim efficiency. For several long moments, no one in the council chamber spoke. Then Forlag stepped forward, military training overriding the protocol that dictated only the High Speaker could respond to formal communications. "This is Commander Forlag, Praxian Defense Force, currently serving as military advisor to the Galactic Council. We're transmitting docking coordinates now. Welcome to Council Space." Thar and several other senior representatives stared at Forlag in shock, but none voiced objection, a silence more telling than any alarm. The face on the screen, General Sharma, gave a curt nod. "Acknowledged. Prepare for our arrival." Sharma out. As the transmission cut, the council chamber erupted into chaos. "You had no authority. Diplomatic protocols clearly state violation of at least 17 security regulations. Weapons. Did you see the weapons on those ships?" Forlag let them vent their outrage and fear, standing immobile until the initial wave of reactions had passed. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the remaining chatter. "They bypassed our most sophisticated detection systems, overrode our communication security as if it were a child's puzzle, and arrived in force at our doorstep without warning. If they meant us harm, we would already be under attack. I suggest we prepare to hear what they have to say." Council security personnel looked entirely out of place escorting the human delegation. The security officers, in their ceremonial uniforms designed for aesthetic appeal rather than practical protection, flanked a group of beings who embodied the antithesis of council values. The humans entered the chamber like warriors entering enemy territory, their eyes constantly moving, assessing exits, defensive positions, potential threats. They wore uniforms of dull gray and black, with no concession to formality or ceremony. Most shocking to the council representatives, each human carried visible weapons, compact devices holstered at their sides or strapped to their limbs. In council space, the open carrying of weapons was considered so unconscionable that most members couldn't remember the last time they had seen an actual weapon rather than a ceremonial replica. General Sharma led the delegation. Up close, she appeared even more weathered than in the transmission. Her movements were precise, economical, as if conserving energy for essential actions only. Behind her walked 5 other humans of varying appearances but similar bearing, military officers, clearly, though their specific roles were not immediately apparent. Thar had recovered enough of his diplomatic poise to step forward, arms extended in the traditional gesture of welcome that had been used in the Council for millennia. On behalf of the Galactic Council, representing over 10,000 worlds united in peace and prosperity, I welcome you, General Sharma, and the delegation of the United Earth Alliance. We are honored to. We don't have time for ceremonies, Ambassador, Sharma interrupted, her voice carrying the same flat urgency it had in the transmission. Every moment we waste on formalities costs lives. Without waiting for permission, she strode to the center of the chamber and produced a small device which, when activated, projected a three-dimensional holographic display large enough for all council members to see clearly. This, she said, indicating a map of what appear to be the outer fringe sectors of council space, is what we've been fighting for the past 3 standard years. The map contained numerous areas marked in black, dead zones where no signals originated, growing in size and number as one moved outward from Council. Space toward the galactic rim. We call it the Void Maw. It's not a species, not in any sense you or we would recognize. It's an entity, or possibly a collection of entities, that consumes energy and consciousness. She manipulated the device, and the display changed to show recordings that caused many council members to recoil. The footage was chaotic, clearly taken from combat situations. Ships similar to those now orbiting council space engaged in desperate battles against darkness. Not metaphorical darkness, but actual regions of space where light and energy simply ceased to exist, where stars became dimmer as if being drained, where matter itself seemed to warp and distort at the boundaries. It began in our outer colonies, Sharma continued, her voice detached, clinical, as if she had separated herself from the horrors she was showing them. At first, we thought it was some kind of natural phenomenon, a spatial anomaly, or an unusual form of dark energy concentration. Then we lost contact with research stations. When we sent investigative teams, they vanished too. The display shifted to show the aftermath of what must have been a massive battle. Human ships, or what remained of them, drifted in space. Many were torn open, revealing interiors where bodies floated among debris. But what caused gasps among the council members were the images of the bodies themselves, desiccated, withered, as if something had extracted not just life, but substance from them. It doesn't just kill, Sharma said, noticing their reactions. It consumes consciousness itself. Our scientists theorize that it feeds on the electrical patterns that create awareness in biological brains, as well as any similar patterns in artificial systems. She changed the display again, now showing data streams and analysis. It learns. It adapts. When it encounters new technology, it assimilates it. We've observed it incorporating elements from our ships, our weapons, even our defensive systems, becoming more efficient at counteracting them with each encounter. Forlag stepped forward, his military training allowing him to process what he was seeing more analytically than his colleagues. You said you've been fighting this for 3 years. How have you managed to contain it? Something like grim satisfaction flickered across Sharma's face, the first emotion beyond urgency she had displayed. Not easily, Commander. We've employed tactics your council would likely consider extreme. The hologram shifted to show a brown dwarf star surrounded by council beacons that marked it as a protected astronomical feature due to its unusual properties. This was the Raxus minor brown dwarf in Sector 87C of your outer fringe, Sharma said. We detonated fusion charges within its core to create a temporary radiation barrier that the Void Maw couldn't penetrate. The radiation killed everything in a 12 light-year radius, but bought us time to evacuate nearby systems. The chamber erupted in shock and outrage. That's a war crime. The Raxus minor dwarf was a protected celestial body. Millions of indigenous species. Enough. Sharma's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. While you were debating pronouns and planning celebrations, we were watching our colonies die. We were evacuating planets. We were sending ships and crews on suicide missions to delay the Void Maw long enough for civilian transports to escape. She pointed at the view screen where her ships were visible in orbit. Those vessels you find so offensive? Those blood-stained ships that horrify your aesthetic sensibilities? They're stained with the blood of men and women who stood between this thing and your precious council worlds. The only reason you're alive to be outraged is because we've been fighting and dying while you've been concerned with protocol. Cthar rose to his full height, his scales now flushed with genuine anger rather than mere indignation. You speak of violating peace treaties that have maintained harmony in this galaxy for thousands of years. Your actions, our actions, Sharma cut in, her voice deadly quiet, were necessary for survival. And now you face the same choice. She manipulated her device once more, and the hologram displayed a projection of the Void Maw's advance. Based on its current trajectory and speed, it would reach Council core worlds within 3 standard months. It's coming. It's already in your territory, consuming your lost probe ships and outposts, growing stronger with each encounter. Your sensors haven't detected it because it absorbs energy, including the energy of your detection systems. Sharma looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many council representatives as possible. We didn't come here to ask for asylum or to beg for help. We came to offer you a choice. Fight alongside us, or die alone. The evidence is written on our ships out there. The emergency session of the Galactic Council, stretched into its 14th hour, a duration unprecedented in recent memory. The chamber, once a showcase of harmony and order, now resembled a war room. Holographic displays showing defense systems, fleet positions, and the projected path of the Void Maw had replaced the usual serene imagery. "This proposal is unconscionable," exclaimed the Vril representative, his bioluminescent appendages pulsing with agitation. "The humans suggest we convert transportation hubs into military staging areas, repurpose medical facilities for weapons production, and divert educational resources to tactical training. This would fundamentally undermine the peaceful foundation of our society." Administrator Phlegm, looking increasingly frazzled, was attempting to create an entirely new classification system on the fly. "I've been searching the archives, and there simply isn't a procedure for emergency wartime alliance with an unrecognized species. The closest precedent is the Temporal Anomaly Cooperation Protocol of the 14th Council Age, but that specifically excludes military coordination." Across the chamber, smaller groups had formed, some vehemently opposed to alliance with the humans, others reluctantly acknowledging the necessity. A faction of younger representatives seemed almost excited by the prospect of action after generations of stagnation. Cthar led the traditionalist faction, arguing passionately about preserving council values even in the face of extinction. "If we abandon our principles at the first sign of danger, what are we fighting to preserve? These humans would have us become as savage as they are." The debates had grown increasingly heated when Commander Forlag, who had been conspicuously absent for several hours, returned to the chamber. The room gradually fell silent as council members noticed his expression. "I have independently verified the humans' claims," he announced without preamble. His voice carried none of its usual deference to council protocol. Activating the central display, he showed his own data, surveillance from automated outposts he had secretly deployed after his official request for investigation had been denied, long-range scans conducted without authorization, and analysis of communication patterns across the outer fringe. The entity they call the Void Maw is real, and it is advancing exactly as General Sharma predicted. Furthermore, I've conducted an honest assessment of our military readiness." He paused, visibly steeling himself. "We haven't fought a war in over 3,000 years. Our defense fleet is ceremonial. A quarter of our ships couldn't achieve orbit if launched today due to maintenance issues. Our weapons systems are outdated, and most of our military personnel have never trained for actual combat." He faced Cthar directly. "Ambassador, I respect your commitment to our values. But our values will not shield us from this threat. Our protocols will not protect us. Only action, however difficult, can save us now." The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, representatives began to signal their readiness to vote. By council standards, The 14 hours of debate before reaching a decision was blindingly fast, a fact that itself underscored the severity of the situation. The alliance was approved by the narrowest of margins. The council observation deck overlooked what had once been a ceremonial parade ground and was now a joint operations center. Human officers in their utilitarian uniforms worked alongside council military personnel, the latter looking somewhat lost without the familiar comfort of bureaucratic procedure. General Sharma stood at a tactical table, surrounded by both human and council officers. She had removed her outer jacket in the heat of the work, revealing arms corded with muscle and marked by scars that told their own stories of past conflicts. The Void Maw doesn't attack in conventional patterns, she was explaining to a group of visibly uncomfortable council commanders. It doesn't have ships or weapons as we understand them. It projects what we call consumption tendrils, extensions of itself that drain energy and consciousness from anything they touch. She manipulated the holographic display to show recorded encounters. Traditional shields are useless. It simply absorbs their energy. Physical barriers work briefly, but it learns to dissolve them. Our most effective strategy has been high-energy, short-duration attacks, followed by immediate withdrawal. Hit and run. Never stay in one place long enough for it to adapt to your specific energy signature. A Malorian commander, their crystalline form vibrating with distress, spoke up. You're suggesting we abandon defensive positions? The Council has always maintained that the best strategy is to create impenetrable defensive lines and wait for aggressors to exhaust themselves. Sharma didn't bother hiding her exasperation. That works when your enemy has limited resources, or can be demoralized. The Void Maw has neither limitation. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get demoralized. It doesn't run out of ammunition. It just keeps coming, consuming everything in its path, growing stronger with each successful absorption. From the sidelines, Forlag watched the exchange with growing concern. The cultural gap between the humans and the Council forces seemed almost as daunting as the Void Maw itself. The humans operated with a directness and pragmatism that bordered on brutality by Council standards. They spoke of acceptable losses, strategic sacrifices, and triage decisions that horrified many of his colleagues. Yet he couldn't deny their effectiveness. In just days, the humans had reorganized Council defense systems, identifying critical weaknesses that had gone unaddressed for centuries. They had begun retrofitting civilian vessels with makeshift weapons and implementing training programs for Council citizens willing to volunteer. Commander Forlag, Sharma called, breaking into his thoughts. I need your support on this next point. He joined her at the tactical table, where she had pulled up a star chart of a nearby uninhabited system. We need to establish a forward operating base in the Tursis system, she explained. It's perfectly positioned to serve as our first line of defense and early warning network. One of the Council representatives, a Laraki whose species considered all star systems sacred cosmic entities, visibly blanched. The Tursis system? But that's a protected stellar nursery. The gravitational harmonics, they're unique in the quadrant. Setting up military installations would disrupt patterns that have been developing for millions of years. Sharma's jaw tightened. A human expression Forlag had learned indicated barely contained frustration. Before she could respond with what would likely be a harsh dismissal, he intervened. Counselor Vren, he addressed the Laraki, I understand your concerns. The Tursis system is indeed a marvel of natural stellar development, but we must weigh its preservation against the survival of all Council worlds. If the Void Maw isn't stopped, it will consume Tursis anyway, along with every other system in its path. The Laraki's luminescent tendrils dimmed slightly, their equivalent of a resigned sigh. I understand the necessity, Commander, but it grieves me deeply. Sharma gave Forlag a brief nod of acknowledgement before continuing with the tactical briefing. It wasn't quite gratitude. Forlag suspected the human general had little room for such sentiments under current circumstances, but it was recognition of his role as a bridge between two vastly different approaches to existence. Later, as the meeting dispersed, Sharma approached him directly. Your people adapt quickly when properly motivated, she observed, watching council engineers beginning to modify communication arrays according to human specifications. Fear is a powerful motivator, Forlag replied. Sharma's expression hardened. Fear paralyzes without purpose. It's not fear driving your people now. It's survival instinct. There's a difference. Forlag studied her for a moment. How long have you been fighting this war, General? Not your species, you personally. Something flickered behind her eyes, a momentary breach in her armor of determination. Since first contact, I commanded the research vessel that encountered the initial manifestation of the Void Maw. Watched it consume half my crew before we could escape. She unconsciously touched a faint scar on her neck. 3 years, 2 months, 17 days by your standard calendar. Lost my homeworld 6 months in. My family was already gone. Earlier conflict, different enemy. Funny how life prepares you for worse things sometimes. It was the most personal information she had shared since arriving, and Forlag recognized it as a form of trust, or at least an acknowledgement that they were now bound by a common purpose. We will learn what we must, he assured her. The council may move slowly, but when finally committed to action, we are thorough. Sharma almost smiled, a brief upward twitch of her lips. Let's hope thorough is enough, Commander. The Galactic Council chamber, once the epitome of bureaucratic stagnation, had transformed. The ornate furnishings had been pushed aside to make room for communication arrays and tactical displays. Emergency lighting had replaced the carefully calibrated ambience, casting harsh shadows that seemed appropriate for the new reality. Ambassador Kthar stood at what had once been his seat of authority, now just another station in an impromptu command center. His scales had lost much of their luster, and his posture showed signs of exhaustion affecting all council members as they worked around the clock to prepare for what was coming. Production quotas have been met in sectors 3 through 7, he reported to a mixed group of council and human officers. The conversion of luxury liner engines to power the shield generators is proceeding faster than anticipated. Administrator Flim, whose natural fastidiousness had found new purpose in coordinating logistics, added, medical supplies have been distributed to all emergency shelters. The evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel are complete and ready for implementation on your order, General. Sharma nodded curtly, her attention focused on the main tactical display where red indicators showed confirmed Void Maw activity creeping steadily closer to core council space. Around the chamber, similar transformations had occurred in the council members themselves. Representatives who had once spent decades debating minor points of protocol now made life-or-death decisions in minutes. Species that had traditionally avoided one another due to cultural differences worked side by side, united by necessity. The humans moved among them like dark catalysts, grim, efficient, pushing constantly for faster action and more decisive measures. What had initially been perceived as brutality was increasingly recognized as the pragmatism of survivors. Forlag entered the chamber after inspecting the newly established defense perimeter. He moved directly to Sharma's side, their working relationship having evolved into something resembling mutual respect, if not quite friendship. The integrated weapons platforms are online, he reported. Your engineers' modifications to our energy distribution systems have increased efficiency by 42%. Sharma acknowledged the report with a nod. Your people learn quickly when properly motivated. Forlag recognized his own word from days earlier being returned to him. We do what we must to survive. As do yours. Their conversation was interrupted by a junior officer rushing toward them. The haste of his movement itself a violation of traditional council decorum that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. General Sharma, Commander Forlag, the officer said, breathless with urgency. The long-range sensors have detected a massive energy fluctuation at the edge of the Melora sector. Pattern matches confirmed Void Maw signatures. Sharma's posture shifted subtly, a tensing that Forlag had come to recognize as her battle readiness. Time to intercept. At current velocity, 37 standard hours. Sharma turned to address the chamber, her voice cutting through all ongoing conversations. This is it. The advance force is coming. All ships to battle stations. Civilian evacuation begins now. First-line defensive positions activate in 1 hour. The chamber erupted into coordinated activity. There was fear that was unavoidable, but it was controlled fear channeled into purpose rather than panic. As council members rushed to their assigned emergency stations, Forlag found himself momentarily alone with Kthar, the ambassador who had once embodied everything tradition-bound and inflexible about the council. Kthar's scales had taken on a muted shade of blue, a color Forlag recognized as the Xylar equivalent of solemn reflection. "I was wrong about the humans," Kthar said quietly. "I call them savages, but they're not. They're survivors." Forlag nodded. "There's a difference. Do you think we could become survivors too, Commander? Or have we been peaceful for too long?" Before Forlag could answer, Sharma approached them, a datapad in hand. "Final deployment orders," she said, handing it to Forlag. "Your ships will form the secondary defensive line behind our advance force." Kthar straightened, his aristocratic bearing asserting itself one final time. "General Sharma, I wish to volunteer for frontline service. I have no military training, but I can learn, and I refuse to shelter behind those who fight on my behalf." Sharma studied him with an evaluating gaze that had likely assessed countless potential soldiers. "Report to Lieutenant Shun on Deck 7. He's training communication specialists. Your linguistic expertise could be valuable there." As Kthar hurried away, Sharma turned to Forlag. "Didn't expect that from him." "People surprise you when survival is at stake," Forlag said, echoing what was becoming a theme between them. Through the main viewport, a stark visual contrast had formed. The elegant, gleaming vessels of the Council fleet, designed for ceremony and display rather than combat, were now aligned in formation with the battered, scarred human ships. Engineers had worked frantically to integrate their systems, creating a hodgepodge defense force that looked as improvised as it was. Yet there was something powerful in that visual, beauty and brutality side by side, neither sufficient alone, but perhaps together enough to survive. Sharma stood at the viewport, watching as shuttles ferried personnel between ships, as weapons were mounted on vessels never designed for combat, as a peaceful civilization transformed itself in the face of existential threat. "Your council chamber," she said softly, "reminds me of Earth's ancient cathedrals, beautiful, intricate, built to inspire awe. We had to abandon ours. Left them behind as we retreated world by world." Forlag joined her at the viewport. "Do you think we have a chance, General?" "Truly." Sharma didn't immediately answer. When she did, her voice carried a weight that seemed to come from some deep reservoir of endurance. "The Void Maw can be hurt. We've proven that. It can be slowed. It can be forced to retreat temporarily. Whether it can be defeated permanently." Distribution. Forlag suppressed a smile. Sharma had found useful applications for even the most bureaucratic tendencies of council personnel. Besides, Flim continued, his voice dropping slightly, "I've served the council for 174 years. I cannot abandon it now." Before Forlag could respond, the station-wide alert system activated. A calm, automated voice announced, "Void Maw advance elements detected within engagement range. All personnel to battle stations. Civilian evacuation phase 3 commencing now." Forlag and Flim exchanged a glance that transcended their species' differences, a moment of shared understanding that everything was about to change. "Good luck, Administrator. Efficiency in your endeavors, Commander." They parted, each heading to their assigned positions, as the final evacuation vessels departed, carrying the last civilians to designated safe zones deeper in Council space. In the command center, Sharma stood before the main tactical display, surrounded by a mix of human and council officers. Her battle-hardened expression revealed nothing as she watched the Void Maws approach. "All ships report ready, General," reported a human lieutenant. "Defense platforms online and targeting systems active," added a council officer. Sharma nodded once. "Begin the engagement sequence. Remember your training. Don't maintain fixed positions. Keep energy signatures fluctuating. And most importantly, if you're ordered to retreat, do it immediately. No heroics. Throughout the assembled fleet, both human and council, crews braced for combat. On the council ships, many had never experienced actual battle. Their training had been compressed into days rather than the years it would normally require. Fear was palpable, but so was determination. The Voidmaw struck with neither warning nor declaration. One moment the darkness was still distant. The next it surged forward, tendrils of non-light stretching across space to touch the outer defensive perimeter. The battle had begun. Human ships moved with practiced precision, executing complex evasive patterns while delivering concentrated energy bursts at the darkness. Council vessels followed their lead, their movements less fluid but increasingly coordinated as training and instinct took over. From his position on one of the defense platforms, Forlag watched the engagement unfold. The humans fought with a ferocity that still shocked him, diving perilously close to the Voidmaw to deliver maximum damage before pulling away. Their ships performed maneuvers that Council engineers had insisted were impossible, pushing structural integrity to its absolute limits. More surprising was watching Council vessels, ships designed for ceremony and diplomatic transport, engaging in combat. They lacked the humans' experience, but compensated with technological advantages. Their advanced energy systems modified, according to human specifications, to deliver devastating blows to the Voidmaw's tendrils. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seemed the defensive line would hold. The Voidmaw's advance slowed, its tendrils recoiling from particularly effective strikes. Council officers began to show cautious optimism. Then the Voidmaw adapted. Its darkness shifted, pulsed, reconfigured. The tendrils that had recoiled from energy weapons now absorbed them, growing stronger. Shapes within the darkness became more defined, twisted reflections of the very ships attacking it. It's learning, Sharma's voice came over the command channel. Pattern Alpha is compromised. Switch to beta formation, modulation sequence 3. The human ships immediately altered their attack patterns. Council vessels followed after a moment's delay, their crews still adjusting to rapid tactical changes. But the Voidmaw continued to adapt. Each effective strategy worked briefly before being countered. The darkness pushed forward, enveloping the first defensive satellites. Forlag watched in horror as a Council corvette was caught by a tendril of darkness. The ship didn't explode or break apart. Instead, it seemed to wither, its lights dimming, its structure somehow reducing as if being consumed from within. When the tendril withdrew, what remained was a hollow shell, its crew and energy completely absorbed. Platform 7 is lost, reported a Council officer, voice shaking. Platform 9 reporting critical energy drainage. First line falling back to secondary positions, Sharma ordered, covering fire from all reserve units. The battle continued for hours that felt like days. The Voidmaw advanced steadily despite everything thrown against it, absorbing ships, platforms, and even weapon fire itself. For every effective countermeasure developed, the entity needed only minutes to adapt. In the Council Command Center, Sharma and Forlag coordinated the increasingly desperate defense. The tactical display showed a grim reality. Despite their combined efforts, the Voidmaw was penetrating deeper into Council space with each passing hour. We need to consolidate our forces at the inner defensive ring, Forlag suggested, highlighting the position on the display. If we concentrate our remaining ships, it won't be enough, Sharma interrupted, her voice flat with exhaustion. Look at the adaptation curve. It's accelerating. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. There's one option we haven't considered, Sharma said finally, pulling up a different display, schematics of the Council Station's power core. Your central station's fusion reactor. If overloaded properly, it could generate a pulse powerful enough to disrupt the Voidmaw's coherence. We've seen similar effects on smaller scales. Thar, who had been coordinating communication between ships, understood immediately. You're suggesting we destroy the Council headquarters? the seat of galactic governance for over 5,000 years. I'm suggesting we use every weapon available, Sharma corrected. This station is just a structure. What it represents can survive elsewhere. Forlag studied the schematics, running calculations. The blast radius would extend to the defensive ring. Any ships within that perimeter would be lost. Yes, Sharma acknowledged, which is why we need to draw as much of the Void Maw as possible into the blast zone while evacuating all essential personnel. You're talking about a suicide mission, Forlag said quietly. Sharma's expression didn't change. I'm talking about survival. Sometimes that requires sacrifice. A tense silence filled the command center as council representatives contemplated destroying the very heart of their civilization, a step that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. It was Kthar who finally spoke. If we sacrifice the council station but preserve enough of our fleet and personnel, we can rebuild. If we lose everything to the Void Maw, there will be nothing left to rebuild. One by one, the council representatives nodded their agreement. Begin evacuation of all essential personnel to fallback position Delta, Forlag ordered. Transfer command functions to the auxiliary fleet. As evacuation procedures commenced, Sharma approached Forlag privately. The reactor overload sequence will need to be initiated manually. The automation systems won't execute a self-destruct command. Forlag understood the unspoken question. I'll do it. No, Sharma shook her head. Your people need you for what comes after. I'll handle the overload sequence. Before Forlag could object, the tactical alert sounded again. The Void Maw had broken through the secondary defensive line much faster than projected. It would reach the station within hours, not the days they had hoped for. Accelerate evacuation, Sharma commanded. All non-essential systems power down now. Divert everything to the shields and the evacuation shuttles. As chaos erupted around them, a strange calm settled over Forlag. In the space of weeks, his entire world had transformed. The council that had existed for millennia would never be the same, regardless of whether they survived this encounter. He watched as human and council personnel worked side by side, no longer separated by protocol or cultural differences, united instead by the simple, primal drive to continue existing. The humans' battle-scarred pragmatism had infected the council species, breaking through centuries of ceremonial stagnation. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The final evacuation shuttles prepared for departure. On the main viewport, the Void Maw was visible now without sensors or magnification, a spreading darkness that consumed the stars themselves, approaching the heart of council space. And out there in the darkness, watching, waiting, the Void Maw approached. Final evacuation shuttles launching in 5 minutes, announced the automated system, its serene voice incongruous with the desperation of the moment. All remaining personnel report to designated departure zones immediately. The command center had emptied considerably, with only essential officers remaining to coordinate the last phase of the evacuation. Sharma studied the tactical display, watching as the Void Maw continued its inexorable advance toward the council station. It's drawn to concentrations of energy and consciousness, she explained to Forlag and the few council officers who remained. Once the evacuation is complete, we'll intensify the station's energy signature, make it irresistible. When enough of the Void Maw surrounds the station, we trigger the overload. And you still intend to remain behind to initiate the sequence, Forlag said. It wasn't a question. Sharma nodded once, her expression resolute. The sequence requires monitoring and adjustments. Automation isn't reliable enough. Then I'm staying as well, Forlag declared. Two have better odds than one. Before Sharma could object, Administrator Flim stepped forward, his diminutive form somehow standing taller than Forlag had ever seen. I will remain also, the knock announced, his translator failing to mask the tremor in his voice. I'm most familiar with the station systems. I can optimize the power flow to ensure maximum effectiveness. Sharma looked between them, a complex emotion flickering across her face, something beyond the hardened determination that had been her constant expression since arriving in council space. This isn't a competition for martyrdom, she said finally. But I won't refuse qualified volunteers. We have 4 minutes to finalize the plan. As they worked quickly to establish the overload sequence, Kthar approached them. The ambassador had been coordinating the evacuation of the Council's historical archives, ensuring that the records of 5,000 years of galactic governance would not be lost. The final data cores are secured, he reported. All irreplaceable artifacts have been evacuated. He hesitated, then added, I've taken the liberty of including personal messages from each of you in the priority transmission to the auxiliary fleet. 4. Afterward, the simple gesture, so human in its sentiment, struck Forlag deeply. Kthar, who had once epitomized the Council's rigid adherence to protocol, had learned perhaps the most important human quality, acknowledging mortality without surrendering to it. Final shuttle departing in 60 seconds, announced the automated system. All remaining personnel must board immediately. That's your cue, Ambassador, Sharma said to Kthar. Make sure the Council rebuilds something worth saving this time. Kthar's scales flushed a deep blue. Respect Forlag knew in Xyler culture. We will honor your sacrifice by learning from it, General Sharma. Commander Forlag, Administrator Flim. He raised his 4 upper limbs in the traditional gesture of highest respect, then turned and departed for the final shuttle. When the shuttle bay doors closed and the station fell silent, the 3 volunteers, Human, Praxian, and Nock, returned to their task with renewed focus. The reactor overload sequence was complex, requiring multiple synchronized adjustments to bypass safety systems designed specifically to prevent such catastrophic failures. Defense systems at 20%, Flim reported as they worked. The Void Maw will breach the outer hull within 17 minutes at current progression rate. Sharma nodded, her hands moving steadily across the control interface. Rerouting power from life support to the reactor. We need to make this place shine like a beacon. As environmental systems throughout the station powered down, the temperature began to drop noticeably. Breath misted in the increasingly cold air of the command center. I've initiated the final lockout sequence, Forlag announced. The reactor safety protocols are disabled. We can trigger the overload at any time. Not yet, Sharma cautioned. We need to draw in as much of the Void Maw as possible. Maximum effect. They watched in tense silence as the darkness approached. On the monitors, the Void Maw's tendrils began probing the station's outer sections, drawn by the intensified energy signature they had created. Hull breach in sections 17 through 24, reported Flim, his small fingers dancing across the control panel with surprising dexterity. The Maw is penetrating faster than projected. It's adapting to our power signature more quickly than I expected, Sharma said, adjusting parameters on her console. We need to accelerate the timetable. The station shuddered as more sections fell to the advancing darkness. Emergency lighting flickered, then stabilized as Flim rerouted power reserves. Remarkable, the Nock murmured, studying the sensor readings. It's not simply destroying the station's structure, it's reshaping it, integrating it into itself. That's how it grows, Sharma confirmed grimly. It doesn't just consume, it assimilates. Technology, energy patterns, even thought structures. Another violent tremor shook the command center. A support beam crashed down mere meters from where they stood. We're running out of time, Forlag warned. The structural integrity field is failing. Sharma checked the tactical display one final time. The Void Maw has committed approximately 60% of its mass to the station integration. It's as good as we're going to get. She looked to her companions. It's time. Together, they moved to the primary reactor control station. The overload sequence required 3 simultaneous inputs, a security measure designed to prevent accidental activation. On my mark, Sharma said, positioning her hand over the control interface. Forlag and Flim did the same at their respective stations. 3, 2, 1. Mark. They each entered their commands. The station's computer acknowledged with a series of tones, followed by a calm voice announcement. Reactor critical overload. Initiated. Detonation in 2 minutes. Evacuation recommended. A humorless smile crossed Sharma's face at the absurdity of the automated recommendation. "We should move to the observation deck," Forlag suggested. "If the Void Maw breaches the command center before detonation, we might not be able to ensure the sequence completes." They made their way through darkening corridors, the station's power now almost entirely diverted to the reactor. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as they reached the observation deck, a vast chamber with transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of space and, now, of the Void Maw as it enveloped the station. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The darkness moved with purpose, tendrils weaving through the station's structure like fingers through hair. Where it touched, matter seemed to both dissolve and transform, becoming part of the greater whole of the Maw itself. 60 seconds to detonation, announced the computer. In the relative quiet of the observation deck, a strange calm settled over the three unlikely allies. Forlag found himself wondering what this moment would have been like without the humans' arrival. The Council, comfortable in its complacency, suddenly confronted by a threat it couldn't debate or proceduralize into submission. "Your people fought well," Sharma said, as if reading his thoughts. "Better than I expected. With proper training, they could become formidable." "If we survive this," Forlag replied, "I believe we will be different, perhaps better." 30 seconds to detonation. Administrator Flim, who had been quietly monitoring a portable data unit, looked up. "The final evacuation fleet has reached safe distance. Whatever happens here, they will survive to continue." Outside the observation window, the darkness continued its consumption of the station. Tendrils of void now pressed against the reinforced transparency of the observation deck itself, creating patterns like frost on glass. If frost could move with deliberate intelligence. 15 seconds to detonation. "It's been an honor," Forlag said simply. Sharma nodded. "Likewise, Commander." "The honor has been entirely mine," Flim added, standing as tall as his small frame allowed. "To serve alongside warriors in defense of all consciousness." 5 seconds. As the final countdown began, a tendril of darkness breached the observation deck, snaking toward them with purposeful malevolence. 3. The darkness reached for them, sensing the concentrated consciousness of three minds. 2. Sharma stood unflinching, staring directly into the approaching void. 1. In the final instant before detonation, Forlag thought he saw something within the darkness. Not shapes or forms, but a pattern, like complex mathematics expressed as pure concept rather than numbers. For a fraction of a second, he almost understood what the Void Maw truly was. Then light, brighter than any star, consumed everything. The reactor overload propagated outward from the Council station in a sphere of pure energy, tearing through the Void Maw's substance. The darkness recoiled, tendrils withdrawing as if in pain. For a moment, the Maw's cohesion faltered, its structure disrupted by the massive energy surge. From the safe distance of the evacuation fleet, Kthar watched the explosion with silent awe. The Council station, heart of galactic governance for 5 millennia, vanished in an instant, taking with it a significant portion of the Void Maw and 3 brave souls. As the light faded and sensors began functioning again, the tactical officers reported their findings with cautious optimism. "The Void Maw has suffered substantial disruption," announced a human tactical officer. "Its cohesion is fragmented. It's withdrawing from the engagement zone. Casualty reports from defensive fleet operations indicate 67% survival rate," added a Council officer. "Better than projected." Kthar stood before the assembled survivors, a mixed group of Council representatives and human officers who now looked to him for leadership. The old protocols and hierarchies seemed meaningless in the aftermath of what they had witnessed. "We have survived this encounter," he addressed them, his scales a solemn blue. "But at great cost. The Council, as we knew it, is gone. Not just its physical headquarters, but the complacency and rigid thinking that defined it for too long." He gestured toward the viewport, where the remnants of the Void Maw could be seen retreating into deeper space. "Our enemy is wounded but not destroyed." It will return, perhaps stronger and more adapted than before. We must be ready. Thar turned to the human officers. We have much to learn from you, not just about warfare, but about adaptability and sacrifice, about what it truly means to survive. To the council representatives, he continued, and we have much to offer in return: knowledge, resources, and perhaps a reminder of what peace looks like when it is earned rather than assumed. As Kthar spoke, a junior officer approached with a data tablet, showing it discreetly to his senior tactical officer. After a brief exchange, the tactical officer interrupted the ambassador. "Sir, long-range sensors have detected an anomalous energy signature at the edge of detection range. It appears similar to Voidmaw patterns, but..." He hesitated. "It's not retreating with the main body. It's moving in a different vector toward the Namari cluster." The Namari cluster, a densely populated region with hundreds of inhabited worlds, most of them without significant defenses. Kthar and the human commander exchanged glances, understanding the implications immediately. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. In the silence that followed, Kthar thought about the scarred human ships that had arrived so recently at the Council's doorstep, how their battle-worn appearance had seemed so offensive to Council aesthetics. Now, looking at the surviving fleet, he saw Council vessels bearing similar scars. Hull breaches hastily sealed, scorch marks from energy discharges, improvised modifications made under fire. They were no longer pristine symbols of peace and prosperity. They were survivors, marked by their struggle. And, somehow, they were more beautiful for it. "Prepare the fleet," Kthar ordered. "We've much work to do." As the survivors mobilized for the challenges ahead, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a tiny fragment of consciousness persisted. 3 minds somehow preserved within the strange substrate of the Voidmaw itself. Not alive in any conventional sense, but not entirely gone either. And somewhere, in that same darkness, a small alert flashed on a damaged console floating amid debris. An energy anomaly that might have been a sensor glitch, or might have been something more. In the chaos of rebuilding, it would go unnoticed. For now.